When we were doing adult cruising on one of the ships that we chartered, I can't remember which one it was, we had our own artist in residence, a gentleman called Robert Bottom, who'd written to the managing director and said he'd like to come on board and do some painting. So he used to come on some of the cruises and he would actually do a demonstration of his creation of his impressionist paintings. And we used to find lots of passengers were saying, "Oh, I'd love to have a go at that. I'd love to have a go at that." So out of it has grown our art classes that we have on many of our cruises, where we invite art tutors to come along and tutor passengers in doing artwork. Well, we've now gone full circle, because at long last we've actually got one of the art tutors who's actually said he'd like to come and do a demonstration for all of us, even those of us who are only good with rollers on walls, which is all I can cope with. So without further ado, to see how all these wonderful paintings are created, this artist in residence, Arnold Lowrey. Thank you.
You might live to regret that. Just a bit of background. I was an electrical engineer who took up a hobby 35 years ago of painting to switch off my electrical engineering. And when I took early retirement 16 years ago, I made it my second profession. So I go around the country teaching and painting and having a whale of a time generally. I even get invited to cruises, you see. This is it's got to be good. I'm glad there's not an interval, David, because you know, one of the dangers of these things is if you go to the toilet in the interval and you forget to switch it off. But however, I've got a good sense of humour. Anyway. We've only got 45 minutes, but I think we can get a picture done in that time. And basically, fine art is painting shapes of tone and colour with imagination and skill. And when you're not doing that, you're not doing fine art. Can you hear at the back? Or? Yeah, okay. Right, okay. Right. You can all hear me, can you? Yes. Lovely. Fine art is painting shapes of tone with imagination and skill. And Tom Stoppard once said, "Skill without imagination gives you craftsmanship, with which you make wickerwork baskets for picnics. And imagination without skill gives you modern art." But he would say that, wouldn't he? All forms of art, I mean, have to have a medium to allow the pigment to stick to the surface. And with oils, you have linseed oil, and acrylics, you've got acrylic polymer. Even the soft pastels have got a gum mixed in with them to make the pigment stick to the surface. Otherwise, you know, you could blow it off. And watercolour's got gum arabic. And so really you've got like a coloured dust mixed with gum arabic and water, and that's your watercolour paint. The brushes can be a whole variety of brushes. I often get people coming to my classes with about 15 or 20 brushes, you know, and they've been given, and somebody sold them a special brush with a purple handle, and they can only use this brush for painting holly trees, and they get so flummoxed as to which brush to use. And I always say, get married to your brushes, know what they'll do and know what they won't do. And then you, but you see that there's square brushes and there's round brushes. And the round brushes are for painting round shapes, and the square brushes are for painting square shapes. But believe it or not, you can paint round shapes with square brushes and square shapes with round brushes. And so they're multifunctional. So the fewer brushes you can have, the better it is. So I normally only have about 5 brushes, possibly 6 at the most, which I use. And I use sable sometimes because they hold a lot of water and they give out the paint at a nice controlled rate. That's what you're paying for there. And I use bristle brushes, which have got a scrubbing action. And the oil painters use those because it gradates the colour, it blends all the colour in. And believe it or not, you can do the same with watercolour. And in fact, bristle brushes are one of the finest brushes you can get for watercolour. And yet so many people say, you're not allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that. But it's amazing what you can do when you say there are no rules. And the paper has got, you have to use watercolour paper because it is sized. And the sizing keeps the pigment on the surface. If you didn't have that, it would sink in and go dull. So, and the paper comes in different thicknesses and different textures. You know, there's cold press, which is a medium range. There's hot press, which is fine, and then you've got a rough. And every manufacturer's got a different pattern on the rough. So, but paper really is a question of getting used to trying one until you get one you like. And the palette, this is my palette. In fact, it's my own design, and I get them made in Wales in very small amounts, and we get 100 made at a time. And but the beauty of this palette is it's got a flat mixing area, and the wells are open-ended so that the water doesn't get trapped. So if I want a lot of paint without any water, I can get a damp brush and I go immediately get instant paint on there. And I like, wherever possible, to wet the paper and feed it with paint rather than mix wishy-washy washes and put it on and it all goes very bland. And so I tend to like to feed the colour in and it gets much more exciting there. So I use a lot of flat brushes, and the sort of thing you can do with a flat brush is, let's just mix something here now, and I could, you see, you can get a nice edge, you see. There we are. And you see, another thing is, you go to these classes and they say, oh, you must put the paint on in a horizontal line and catch the bead underneath. Well, I haven't got time for that. It's baloney. And, you know, it's when you've got a couple of months to spare, and I haven't got a couple of months to spare. And so I tend to, I paint like you paint the wall of a house. Now, if you paint the wall of a house in all different directions, then you don't get any streaks, do you? And it's the same in watercolour. Not a lot of people know that. And but I mean, we could sort of come down here now, perhaps, and you know, we're shape making, right? So we're joining things together, you see, and you know, so perhaps put a few little door in there, perhaps, and see, I'm not being rough as can be with it. See, and immediately you can start to see. Perhaps we could put a couple of shadows across here. You know, put a little shadow there, and a shadow under there, and perhaps a shadow there. See, and perhaps a few shadows across here. See, and immediately, see, you're starting to get a shape, which is. We better switch that one off now, haven't we? And let me just switch this off 1 second because it's just distracting, isn't it? And